So now we've added some slowdown to our API, let's add some loading indicators so that we give the user some indication that something is happening when our page is loading. So let's take a look at Semantic UI React, because this does provide some loading indicators that we can use. And if we take a look in the documentation for Semantic UI React, we've got a loader here that we can utilize. And if we take a look at the try it, then what this loader is inside is a dimmer, which is going to dim out the background of our application and just show a loading spinner. And what we'll do is we'll make use of this to create a loading component that we can display in place of our application whilst we're waiting for it to load. So we're going to head back to VS Code, and inside my app folder, inside the layout folder, I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call this loading component.tsx. And we'll just create this just like any other component, RAFC, and press return. And what we want to add inside here is we'll take out this div and we'll swap it for the dimmer from Semantic UI. And we'll just close off this dimmer as well. And inside here, what we'll add is a loader. And what we'll do is we'll give our dimmer some properties. We'll set it to active, because we're only going to display this if the dimmer is active. And we'll also take in a couple of properties for this as well. One of them is going to be inverted, and we'll set this equal to inverted, which we'll add as a property to this. And inside our loader, we'll take in some content, and we'll set this equal to content, which will just be a string to say what is currently loading at this time. And what we'll do is we'll add these as properties in our loading components. What we'll do is we'll make this a react.fc, and instead of adding an interface this time, what we can do is just add these properties directly inside an object inside these type parameters for the React component. So what I'm going to do is add an inverted property, and this is going to be a boolean, and we'll also make this optional, and we'll set this, so we'll add a question mark to make this an optional property. And we'll also do the same for content. We'll make this optional and set this to be a string. And then we'll just destructure these props from this object inside the parameters. And we'll say inverted and content. And then we can make use of this loading component in our application. So let's start with the activities list. And if we go to our app component, what we can do is we can add some additional states, and we can say const loading, and we can say set loading equals use states, and we'll set this to true initially. And inside our use effect hook, what we can do is after our activities have been received, we can add another len statement after this one. And inside here, what we can do is say set loading and set it to false. And what we can do before we return from this, we can say if we're loading, then what we want to return is our loading component, and we'll set the content equal to loading activities ... And if we go and take a look at our application and we just refresh the page, then what we see is our loading indicator. But that's a bit too dark for my liking for our particular application, so I'm just going to head back to our loading component, and for the inverted property, I'm just going to give this an initial value of true. And if we go and take a look, then we can see our loading indicator has got a lighter background now. So that works for our activities, but what about our buttons? What about when we edit an activity and we make a change and we submit? What we can also use in Semantic UI is certain elements, we can give them loading indicators. And we'll take a look at adding loading indicators to our buttons next.